Thanks again for joining us today for the 2022 Brown Bag Lunch and Learn series. It's always great to see some familiar names on here. We really miss seeing your faces here on site for the Lunch and Learns. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the 2022 Brown Bag Lunch and Learn series is hosted by the Friends of Birmingham Botanical Gardens. The webinar is presented in partnership with the Alabama Cooperative Extension System, the Alabama Green Industry Training Center, the Jefferson County Department of Health, Jefferson County Commission, City of Leeds, Alabama, City of Birmingham Stormwater Management, and the Stormwater Management Authority Incorporated. And today, we have Amanda Clark with us, who's going to be presenting on container vegetables. And Amanda Clark actually used to be a gardener here at the gardens with the City of Birmingham. Amanda is a horticulturalist from Birmingham, Alabama. She graduated from Bessemer Tech with a degree in ornamental and turf horticulture and has been working in the field for 20 years. She has a permaculture design certificate through the Permaculture Research Institute, signed by Bill Mollison, and her specialties include annuals, perennials, bulbs, vegetables, and houseplants. Some of her jobs include conservatory horticulturalist of the Day Butterfly Center at Callaway Gardens, flower gardener at the University of Montevallo, and perennial and vegetable gardener at Birmingham Botanical Gardens. She has a passion for organic gardening, permaculture, community gardens, and loves teaching gardening skills to all ages. A lot of you have met Amanda before when she was working here at the gardens. A lot of you might have even had some kids go to her summer camps here at the gardens. And I think she'll be back this summer, won't you, Amanda?
Yeah, next week.
So Amanda's going to be back next week leading a summer camp for us. And we're just so happy and grateful that she comes back every year and helps us with our Lunch and Learn series.
All right, well, thank you. I enjoy doing this. I love talking about gardens. You know, sometimes it's hard to shut me up. I could get going and just keep on. So I made myself an outline today, so hopefully I won't ramble on too much. But I'm so excited that y'all are all here. And, you know, this is a topic that isn't really covered in a lot of programs, the container gardening. And a lot of people are asking me already, it's starting to get hot outside and everybody's saying, can I still do it? Can I still go out there and garden? Is it too late to plant my vegetables? Well, it is definitely not too late. We live in the great state of Alabama, and we've got a very long growing season, and we're able to plant and harvest almost all year round. I see somebody, Dawn, doesn't have audio. Can other people hear me? If somebody will type yes in the chat. Yeah, I don't see my video should be on.
Yeah, your video is not on right now.
Okay, I'm seeing your Friends of the Botanical Garden screen. Let me switch. Okay, if you switch, I'm not considered the main speaker. Perhaps if you, there we go. All right, I see myself now. If you switch to gallery view, you may see me.
Barry, with the audio, does that mean that you can't hear us or we can't hear you?
Okay. All right, it seems that most people can hear. Do you like me to keep going, Dawn?
Yes, I'm gonna see.
And maybe you could work that out on the sidelines.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute myself and then message Barry to see what's going on.
Okay. Well, today I want to let you know I've got a handout for everything that I'm covering here. So when I mention variety names and things like that, don't feel that you have to be scribbling everything down, because there is a lot of material to cover. But Dawn will send that out for everybody who has been able to access this link. You'll also get another email that has the recording of the video and also this outline and all the information that you need. So I'll take questions after. If you anytime, feel free to go ahead and put your questions in. There's a question and answer section you should see on your screen. And then towards the end, we'll answer those. And I see some chats. I may not be able to see some chats during. So that's why we'll answer after. And that way everything will just flow a little bit better. So
Barry can hear us now.
Okay.
And Mark just said, I can hear you, but no video. So Amanda's face should be available now. You won't be able to see me. I cut my video off that way that you won't focus on me and you'll focus on Amanda. So y'all won't be able to see me, which is Dawn talking to y'all right now. But in a few minutes, Amanda is going to start her presentation with that outline and she's going to share that for y'all to see so you can follow along.
Okay. All right, everybody says they can see now. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to the outline just so you can follow along and know where we are and know that this does have a general purpose and an outline. So I'm going to do that. You may see me disappear for a minute. All right, I'm sharing my screen here. Hopefully everybody can see this. All right, so it's kind of strange. I'm not used to doing this where I'm not hearing people talk back and forth much. So I just, sorry if I'm a little awkward, but hopefully this will go well. So the first thing is, you know, why would people grow vegetables in containers? You know, there's a lot of reasons. There's things that are, you know, pros and cons, obviously. They're great for small gardens and patios. If you're in a rental property and don't want to dig up big areas of the grass, those are some good reasons. If you have good sun exposure and, you know, live in an apartment, you can grow vegetables on the balcony, believe it or not. Or if you're just one of those people that likes to have a patio and porch up next to your house where you kind of do a lot of your outdoor living, it is so nice to just go outside and see, you know, beautiful pots of flowers. They're very easy to maintain when they're right up close to you like that. Also, it's a lot less of a startup cost. So when you're planting in the ground, you know, you need a lot of materials. You've got, you know, soil to buy, soil amendments, fertilizers, mulch, and it can really add up quickly. Not to mention, you know, the toll on your body as you're out there tilling and weeding and all the very difficult things that gardening is kind of physically challenging, as you probably know. So this is great for people that have trouble bending a lot. You can get, if you get tall pots, they'll be kind of at high, you know, waist height, or you don't have to bend over as much. So those are all very, very good things, good reasons to have vegetables. Some of the cons are that you're not going to get quite as much yield as you would in an outdoor garden. Obviously, the soil, you know, you've got a lot more room. There's a lot more nutrients in the soil than you could ever add in through artificial means to a pot. There's just lots of minerals and things that, you know, fertilizer companies don't even know how to make. So the ground does have advantages in that way, but sometimes, you know, all you need is a few. You don't necessarily need a carload of squash. And you know, you've all heard the joke about don't leave your doors locked. I mean, you make sure to lock your car doors in summertime, or you might come back and find it full of squash if you're good friends with a gardener. So sometimes it's just enough, especially for a smaller family. So one of the biggest cons, I would say, would be just how much water it takes. You know, all gardens take maintenance, but the main thing that the container gardens take is just very constant vigilance when it comes to watering. Sometimes, depending on the size of your pot, you may have to water twice a day in the summertime in a full sun container. Say if you have window box planters or things like that. You've really got to watch that. However, there are some things you can buy, like some home drip tubing that you can set up. If you have a good hose, good tight sturdy hose, and hose connectors are kind of a must for that. But that is a way that you can water several plants. If you've got a lot, consider investing in one of that, and that kind of reduces that con there. What are some of the requirements? Basically, the same requirements you'd have for an in-ground vegetable garden applies to the containers as well. Most vegetables require about 6 to 8 hours of full sun, unfiltered sun every day. And that's probably the most challenging thing for people wanting to grow vegetables. Now, there are some that take less sun, that'll take, like herbs are great for partial sun gardens, 4 hours of sun a day, or just like filtered sun. Also, some of the fall crops like, lettuces and broccoli and kale. Most of the fall crops can take a little more shade, and you can tend to grow those a little longer into the growing season if you have shady conditions for those. Also, I would never consider, you've probably all thought about this at some point. I know I have, but some people will say, I'll grow my vegetables in a container because I don't have a lot of sun and I can move them around as the sun moves in the day. And that is not a very practical idea. It'll get very, very old very quickly. And as the plants get bigger, it just becomes less practical. But I do sympathize with those that don't have a lot of sun. And I know that that's one consideration. Maybe if you have small pots, you could try it, but you will probably stop doing that when it gets real hot. Let me see. I see a question on there. Okay, that was not a question. Okay, good. What do they need? Drainage. All pots must drain unless you're growing a water garden. A lot of the nice ceramic pots out there don't have holes in them. You can get around that by putting large rocks in the bottom and having a smaller container set inside the larger container, so you have somewhere for excess water to go. However, you also need they have handheld sump pumps for pots if you feel that you must put a pot in a container without holes, but I would highly recommend against it. When the vegetables just don't like wet feet, and if they'll start to get smelly and things like that, and start to rot the roots of the plant. So definitely make sure that you have holes. That's very important. One of the biggest challenges is moisture. They tend to dry out quickly. The smaller the container, the quicker it dries out. So you'll really need to check your pots every morning and afternoon, and water as needed. Now, you may get to points where you'll start knowing how much water your plant's taking, and you may not have to check it as frequently once you kind of get a feel for how much water they're taking. But bright sunny days, they're going to soak up a lot more water than they are on an overcast day. So you really need to kind of stay in tune with what those needs are. If your pots are closer to the house, like on a patio or a porch or somewhere where you see them every day, you walk by them, that's usually best, because you'll kind of have a good idea of what they need. Whereas if they're far away from you, you're going to have a lot more likelihood of missing something or letting them maybe get a little bit too dry. The general rule is with vegetables and with flowers too, sometimes if your plants are dry enough to wilt, they're dry enough to affect the yield of your flowers or your fruit. I've heard someone put it, every day of wilt is a day off of the bloom. So you really want to make sure that moisture is taken care of if you want good good harvests. Your plants will live if you kind of miss them every now and then, obviously, but they just won't yield very well. A short rain shower may not be enough to water a large pot, particularly if your foliage is dense. So don't rely on the rain. It takes a good couple of hours of rain to get a pot wet. And so you really need to check that. Also, if you're going out on vacation, just like you would have someone care for your pets, you know, if you've got plants in containers, you should probably see if somebody will water your plants for you. I know that's kind of scary sometimes, giving someone control of the watering hose when you've got your precious plants on the line, but your plants will be much happier and will stay alive, especially if you're going out for a week. That your planters just can't really go that long. So where am I? Types of containers. Okay, minimum size. You want to make sure that you've got enough room for your plants to grow. One of the biggest issues with container gardens is the tendency to overplant. I guess that's kind of common in the outdoor space too, but and you can get this handout, so you don't necessarily have to write this all down. But for small containers like window box planters, strawberry pots, or 6-inch containers, you could do many different herbs, green onions, lettuces, and things like that. But you'll need larger pots for other types of vegetables. You'd need a minimum of a 1 to 2 gallon pot, which is equivalent to an 8 to 10 inch planter, for chard, dwarf tomatoes, lettuce, radish, and spinach, and a 2 gallon pot or 10 inch plant for turnips, green beans, broccoli, and cucumber, a 5 gallon pot, which is like a 12-inch pot for a single per plant, tomato, eggplant, pepper, or squash. Carrots will need a pot 2 inches deeper than whatever your variety is. So Danvers half long is a good carrot variety for pots, but they're going to be 4 to 6 inches. So you'll need a pot that's at least 8 inches deep. So no azalea pots for vegetables. Azalea pots are shorter, whereas vegetables need deeper plant pots. So that's something to look at when you're picking out your planters. You could try for nursery pots. They're not very attractive, but they're cheap or free. They have a very good depth on them, which is great for vegetables. But if you're reusing pots, you definitely want to sterilize them with a 10% bleach solution if you're going to reuse it. So that way, any kind of diseases, particularly soil-borne diseases, tend to hang out in pots. So also, insect eggs and things like that. Yes, nursery pots, Carol, are the black plastic ones you buy your shrubs in. Yes, those can be reused if you just mix up a 10% bleach solution in a spray bottle, or if you have a lot to do, if you have a tub of some kind, you can do that and kind of wash those down and let them dry naturally, and that'll kill any germs on there. That's especially important if you're planting seeds. Very, very important if you're planting seeds. Yeah, I've gotten away with not sterilizing pots for other types of hardy plants, but definitely not seeds. Plastic pots are great. Any just decorative plastic pots. They're usually inexpensive and they hold water really well. Clay has great drainage and it's attractive, but it dries out a lot faster. And a freeze can also break them in the wintertime. So you have to watch out for that. You really probably don't want to do winter vegetables in clay if you can help it. And the same thing goes for ceramic. Those can also freeze and crack in the winter. But ceramic pots are really nice. They hold moisture well, but they don't always have drain holes. So you want to make sure that they have drain holes. They're usually more expensive, but there are definitely some beautiful options out there. And then my personal favorite, if you have the space for this, is what they call whiskey barrels. A lot of garden centers sell these. They make great containers. You may or may not have to drill holes in the bottom, depending on how they're marketed and if they've done that already. You can usually plant a little variety of plants in a barrel, so it makes it a lot more attractive. Say you could grow like a tomato with a tomato cage. You can usually get like one large plant, an herb or two, and maybe a couple of flowers in a whiskey barrel. So your flowers will attract your pollinators. Your herbs kind of help deter pests with their scent, and plus the attractiveness is a factor. And the only thing I would caution against is if you're planting flowers, some plants on the commercial market have been treated with systemic insecticides, and that might not be great to translocate into your vegetables. So try to see if you can get them from a good source, where you kind of know how they've been treated, maybe a farmer's market or somewhere like the Botanical Gardens when they have their plant sales, or try starting some of your own. That way you know what the plants have been treated with or not. As far as soil and amendments, there's a lot of ready-made mixes out there. I highly recommend a ready-made mix. Usually garden soil and homemade compost and things like that are a little thick and heavy for pots. They tend to hold water too long, hold a little more insects, and they can cause problems in pots. So there's a lot of ready-made mixes out there, both organic and inorganic. I'm sure you've all seen the Scott's and Miracle Grow. Some of those contain like most of your season's worth of fertilizer. They also have water retention polymers added. So that helps have good drainage and water retention. Your plants are going to yield really well because they're going to have their fertilizer needs met. But you definitely want to look for a variety that's specified for outdoor containers. Indoor potting soil is very different mix than the outdoor potting soil. It's going to drain a lot quicker and dry out a lot faster. It's often hard to re-wet. So make sure that it's said for outdoor containers, outdoor vegetables, something like that. I believe Scott's and probably Miracle Grow has organic container soil. Usually they're a little more expensive, but they don't have anything added. So often you have to, I think there are some that have organic fertilizers, but you'll still want to add some of your own throughout the season. Some of your own fertilizer like fish emulsion, something that will continue to supply nitrogen. And if you want that, the polymer, the water retention polymer, I can't think of the name of what it is. There's several varieties out there you can get. And it's like the stuff that they put in diapers. It's just it's almost like a hard plastic when it's dry, and then it absorbs like many times once it gets wet, and then it'll slowly release that water back into the soil. So those are really cool and really helpful for pots. You can add that on your own too. If you're buying potting soil, don't go to the dollar bins. They're probably $2 now at Home Depot, Lowe's, places like that. Those are good for filling holes in the ground pretty much. They're usually rancid when you buy them. They've been, they don't drain well. Definitely stay away from those. You'll know what, those are the ones where they have, 50 pallets of them out there. Not good for pots. One other amendment you're really going to need especially if you're growing tomatoes is calcium. Blossom end rot is a disease of tomatoes that is either caused and or facilitated by lack of calcium. So there are many products on the market. Any nursery you go to will have a blossom end rot calcium source. Just ask your local, supply store, and they could probably lead you right to it. You just basically mix that with water and add it, through the season, depending on the label directions. Each product might be a little different. All right, so now we're into some of the fun part, the actual vegetables. Let's see. I'm gonna sit here. Here's a little list here of some vegetable varieties for containers. Like I said, this you don't necessarily have to write all this down. You can get the copy of this. It's just a Word document that you can print out or save and access at will. But for your summer crops, there's lots of different varieties here that are listed that, have been selected because of their small size for containers. However, consider that if you have a large enough pot, really most of the plants will work. You might notice that I do not have corn listed here. Corn is not really a great container. I don't have okra on here, I realize too. There are a couple of dwarf okra varieties as well. But I have a source listed on here later about the county extension publication that has a list of some of these as well. There are many lists out here of dwarf varieties of plants. Now, tomatoes, this is my only note here, is that if you're just going to pick any of your favorite varieties of tomatoes, say you like Celebrity or you have a favorite, make sure that you're planting a determinate variety. A determinate variety is one that puts on all its growth and then fruits pretty much at once or over a short period of time and then stops growing. Whereas the indeterminate varieties are more of what I would call the vining types. They're the ones that you have to have a very tall trellis for, or you have to keep pruning because they just keep growing and growing and growing all season long. Those usually aren't the best for pots. So just think determinate variety. Every tag that you see will specify whether it's determinate or indeterminate. Some of these you probably notice some. Husky Cherry, Tiny Tim, Tumbling Tom for your tomatoes. That's a good hanging basket tomato. I see Baby Bubba Dwarf Okra. Let me see that chat here. Alice says that Baby Bubba Dwarf Okra is being grown both in containers and in beds in the Bruno vegetable garden. If you want to go see that, that's awesome. Yeah, you'll notice at the vegetable garden, there's a few very large containers out there, and there are I believe they're concrete. Those have lasted for years and years and years and years, and there's a very good volume of soil. We've grown a lot of different vegetables in there. So if you look at those pots, you might have a hard time getting your hands on one that big, but if you can, that's a great container for vegetables. I'm not going to read all of these out. Y'all can look at this on the list, and I'd probably just bore you to death doing that. So I'm going to kind of skip past that. So troubleshooting. Underwatering is one of the biggest problems people have with pots. Your plants will usually wilt. They'll have yellow leaves and crumbly leaves. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between overwatering and underwatering as far as the yellow leaves goes, but the underwatering usually has crumbly leaves as well. Overwatering, plants can still wilt when they're overwatered, which is kind of confusing. But if you watch your plants a lot, you'll notice that water wilting has a slightly different look to it. And the leaves will be yellow, but not necessarily crispy. But one, I have here some of the signs are stinky soil, soil gnats, droopy plants with bright yellow leaves. They do have a soil probe that you can buy if you don't like sticking your finger in your pots to see, you know, how moist they are. You can buy just about everything online these days, but there is a very long, narrow probe that has little notches on the side that you could stick down in your container and lift back out, and then you can use your fingers to feel the soil on the 3 little chunks of soil that it takes out. But they're very thin. Don't think a soil sample probe, because that takes out a huge core, and you can't use that very often without just taking all your roots and soil up with it. If your plants look tall and weak and they aren't flowering or fruiting, most likely you don't have enough sun. Too much sun's not usually a problem, but I cannot tell you how many times that I have gone out and bought tomatoes at the first of the season and put them straight out in the garden. And in 2 or 3 days, they were almost dead because I sunburned them. And that's because the greenhouse grown, a lot of these are greenhouse grown. The brightest sun inside a greenhouse is not as bright as they measure light in foot candles. It has less foot candles than the densest, darkest shade outdoors. So think the middle of the forest actually has more light than the bright greenhouse. That's really hard to believe, but when I was in horticulture school, we went and tested that with with light meters. And it's true. So signs of sunburn are scorched leaves. Usually you'll see a white on the top of the leaves. I see this a lot on summer planted cole crops like kale. Kale tends to scorch real easily. Sometimes the top leaves will kind of shade the bottom ones and the top ones will get sunburned. But if you get plants in the early spring, say for like at the plant sale or things like that, they might have been greenhouse grown, and just stick them out in the shade for at least 3 or 4 days before you plant them in the garden, and your plants will thank you. Your plants may survive being put out in the sun too quickly, but they may not, and they may not ever really recover. They'll be stunted and will not yield well pretty much the whole season. So another way you can stunt your plants, particularly tomatoes, is if you put them out too early. If you put them out before the average temperature at night is above 50 degrees, you could have some stunting of your plants on those too. Just a moment. Okay, overcrowding. That is the biggest tendency, like I said, for pots, is you just want to throw it all in there. But although that may work for the first month, once your plants grow, they're not going to have enough room. It's going to breed disease on your leaves. It's going to be a safe haven for insects. They're not going to be able to get the moisture that they need or the nutrition that they need. Your plants kind of can tend to grow too tall and fall over. So make sure that each plant has its space. Something that I don't have here that you may consider if you're wanting to do larger containers like the barrels or things like that, or something that you have made up yourself, look at a square foot gardening list for how big each actual plant needs, and then you'll know how much. I would say generally peppers, eggplant, tomatoes need a very minimum of 1 square foot, if not 2, and squash needs about 3 square feet. So everything else, just go by that pot per plant size that we had earlier. Okay, pests. Plants in containers get the same pest problems as plants in the garden. When your plants are stressed out, they're going to be a lot more likely to get pest and disease. So just taking care of your garden is, and making sure that it's watered well and fertilized well is half the battle. Of course, all plants get disease and problems. You know, don't think you're a bad gardener if your plants get pests or if they get disease. It just happens. That's just part of the territory. Some good things to have on hand. I'm generally an organic gardener. So this is what I tend to use is insecticidal soap, and that controls soft-bodied insects, aphids, mites, thrips. Those are some of your most common pests. That BT or Bacillus thuringiensis, it'll get your caterpillars and the larva stage of beetles. So think cucumber beetles, the bean beetles. It will not kill the adult beetles. It will, now the insecticidal soap will have some control on that, a little bit of control, but the BT controls any larval stages that are on your plant, which is basically breaking the life cycle. Usually these products have to be used usually you use them once and then come back in 3 to 7 days, depending on your product. You have to read the label. That way you're getting more than one stage of the insect. You might be killing the adults, but might not be killing the eggs. So the eggs hatch out in a few days and then you hit them one more time to get those. So that 2-step spray is really important, and will save you a lot of sprays later. I have on here, avoid savin dust, please, please, please. This is something that's been used in vegetable gardens probably for 100 years, or I don't know when that was created, but it's very harmful to bees. I mean, you're killing all the honeybees, the pollinators, and you need those. You need the pollinators for your own yield, but also, you know, the world needs them. We rely on them to live. So the savin dust is very, very harmful. They basically come and try to forage, and just like they would pick up pollen, they're picking up that savin dust and carrying it around too, and possibly killing their hive. I have here a lot of bolds. Please always follow the label, always follow instructions. Even if you have the same product as someone else, if it's a different brand, there may be some slightly different information you need. So that is so important. I cannot stress that enough. Also, that PHI, anything listed, you want to make sure your vegetables are listed and that you follow the post-harvest interval. And what that means is a spray will tell you, don't harvest for 1 to 3 days after using this product. You don't want to poison anybody or yourself, so make sure that you follow that. There are most of the organic products tend to have a very, very short post-harvest interval. A lot of them say use right up to the day of harvest. So make sure you're looking for that on your labels. Ants can be a problem in pots. Sometimes they're just sugar ants, and sometimes I've just kind of lived with them and never truly gotten rid of them. But they like dry soil. So if you're, kind of slacking on the water, that's when they will tend to move in. So that might be a sign that you need to increase your water some. And then you can use a little mixture of soap in your water. I have on here a teaspoon of like Dawn liquid soap to 1 gallon of water. Actually water your plants with it if you're having ants, and that'll help get rid of the ants. And also that soap is kind of like a polymer as well. If your plant gets extremely dry, and it's going to happen, as good as you're doing, it's probably going to happen sometimes. Your plant's going to get so dry that it's going to start repelling water. Sometimes you can use that same ratio of dish soap to water and water your plant with it, and it helps that soil absorb water again. If your plant does get dry enough to wilt, water it, wait an hour or 2, and then come water it again, because that first water is going to fill the plant back up, and then your second water is going to get the soil wet. Diseases, same information goes for diseases. If it's stressed, they're more likely to have it. Overcrowding contributes to disease. So make sure you have good airflow, good space in your garden, and good airflow. water at the base of the plants instead of on top, especially for tomatoes, because that water splashing from leaf to leaf or from soil to leaf is usually what spreads a lot of disease. I have here that Garden Safe has a combination insecticide fungicide for vegetables. I think I put that in, no, I put that in the right spot. Okay. That might be helpful if you have some foliar diseases on tomatoes, but tomatoes just tend to get a lot of foliar diseases. Some of it can be managed just by avoiding that wet foliage and avoiding overcrowding. You're not going to be able to have completely spot-free plants, probably. Just be okay with some degree. They have what they call the damage threshold. Sometimes you don't have to worry about it unless your damage threshold is high enough to just make your plant look completely terrible where you can't stand to look at it anymore, or it's actually affecting the health or the yield of the plant. If it's not doing either of those things, you know, some things can be just, you know, allow nature to take its course. If you've got some aphids, but you've also got ladybugs, you're probably okay. But if you start getting so much that your plants are looking sticky, you know, you're probably going to need to spray some. Nutrients. Sometimes the pots tend to get nutrient deficiencies because everything, that soil that you buy is completely, they call it a sterile mix usually when you first get it. There's just not much in there as far as food for your plants. Fertilizer has to be added. If you're using organic products, you will most likely need to get your own fertilizer and mix in to your soil so that that's available from the root zone into your plants. I have it listed here. Some of those items are compost, earthworm castings, bone meal, blood meal, granular fertilizers. I like that Ladybug brand. They sell that at Classic Gardens and Landscapes. Very inexpensive. I think it's $25 for a 40-pound bag, maybe. Some people like to buy rock dusts. That supplies a lot of minerals. I can't say that is technically organic, but I would not say that it is sustainable. Those are mined products, so that if you really are concerned with sustainable garden practices, I wouldn't use a ton of rock dust. Depending on where it's mined from. If it's a byproduct, that's one thing, but if it's mined specifically for gardening, you know, not very sustainable. Fish emulsion is a good organic fertilizer that you can water your plants with if you're doing organic. It provides nitrogen, which all vegetables need, all plants need, but it is stinky, so just kind of be prepared for that. If you have it right next to your front kitchen door, maybe not the best place for fish emulsion. That's one you might want farther from the house. I hope I'm not getting too long here. There's always more to say than there is time. And this is you could probably have a whole class on every single one of these topics. Starting your own plants. A lot of people like to start their own seeds. You get a lot greater variety to choose from, and you get a head start on the season and save money. And it's just fun. It's fun to do. But here's some things to consider. Make sure that you order early. If you're waiting until like a week before spring planting, you might not get your seeds in time. It's very common that seed companies get inundated with orders just right at the last minute. And it might take several weeks before you get your seeds. So when it's really cold in January and you want a garden, but you don't feel like getting out there, then, sorry about that, then get your catalogs out and start planning your garden and order your stuff early. And make sure that when you're looking through your catalogs that you get varieties that say that they're good for hot and humid conditions. We used to, in the gardens, get a lot of seeds from Johnny Seeds. They're in Maine. They have big packets of seeds, great for large gardens. But a lot of their varieties don't do well down here. So you really need to read those descriptions. And also I have some publications from the county extension listed here for some of our good varieties for our area. And also I've got the Alabama Gardeners calendar listed there. You could call the county extension office, or actually you can just look that up. When you get this document, just copy and paste Alabama Gardeners calendar and the ANR number. It'll come up. It's available to view online. That'll tell you when to start your seeds, when to transplant. A lot of seeds need 6 to 8 weeks. So make sure you give yourself time to do that. Usually root crops like to be, anything that's a root usually likes to be started in whatever pot they're going to stay in. So you could just sow your seeds right on the pots. Those also take smaller pots, except for potatoes. That's they need a whiskey barrel. But the carrots, turnips, radishes, they can go in smaller pots. So it's not too much of a stretch to think of putting those in your house in some sunny windows to get started. Follow your package directions. Some seeds like to soak. We've got some gardeners with our group that are very, very knowledgeable on seeds. Some of them like to be scored, like people will take sandpaper and rub some of the seeds with sandpaper. But usually soaking is sufficient. Chard seeds are chards, beets, beans. They're very, very hard seed, and soaking makes a huge difference. You can even do, if y'all seen a germination test done before, where you take the paper towels and put, a germination test would be you put 10 seeds in, you would fold the towel up, wet it, put it in a plastic bag in a sunny window, and you keep checking it to see how many germinate. And that'll let you know how viable your seeds are if you've saved seeds from year to year. But it's also a way that you can go ahead and sprout that seed before you stick it in the soil if you want to do that. That's something that's kind of practical if you're doing small gardens like a container garden. And we're kind of getting towards the end here. Some of your best sources of seeds, and plants, farmers markets. You can get some really good deals on plants at the farmers markets. The Botanical Gardens plant sale, I got to plug that. Those are grown by volunteers. They raise funds for education and for the gardens programs. Those plants are specifically very, carefully selected for our area. So you're going to get something that is going to do good in our southern gardens. So I highly recommend that. That's 2 times a year, usually in April and October. Definitely check those out. Bonnie plants, y'all see those at Home Depot, Lowe's, a lot of those places. Very good quality plants. They have selections that are popular for our region. Try to check and see when the truck comes in for your local nursery, so that they don't have to sit out there on the shelves and get picked over and go too many hours without water. So if you can get to know your nursery staff, that's very helpful. Most people know of Burpee. They're well known, been around a long time. They have very good quality, but their seed packets are really small. They have a small number of seeds in their packets, I've noticed. But that might not be a problem for container gardens. Some other ones that I personally like, Baker heirloom seeds, great selection. If you don't know what an heirloom variety is, that's typically a variety that's been around for 100 years or more. Very tried and true plants. A lot of them are very insect tolerant. I tend to plant both heirloom and hybrid varieties. Hybrid varieties, I guess now we're starting to get to that point where some hybrids could potentially be heirlooms. But if you're going to start your own seeds, you need to make sure that you don't want to get hybrid seeds, because when you replant your seeds from a hybrid plant, it might not be like the plant that you originally got. It'll have qualities of either of their parent plants and not both. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, I love them because they have a little symbol next to their plants that are good for the humid southeast. They're a smaller company, so they may need a little time to get stuff shipped to you, but I've always had good luck with their seeds. They have a lot of open pollinated varieties. That means those are varieties that you can save seed yourself from year to year and have plants that are true to form. Seed Savers Exchange, they offer a lot of heirlooms, culturally diverse and endangered crops. They also have a membership where you can request seeds from other members and you can offer seeds. They have like a seed swap catalog, which is real fun. And the Botanical Gardens, I believe they still have this. They have a card catalog seed library. So they took their old card catalog and are now collecting seeds. And gardeners can donate and, in quote, borrow seed. And what borrowing seed means is you take some of their seed and grow it and have in mind to collect some seed from your own plant to return when you're at the end of the season. Don't be afraid to get it. If you're afraid, I've never saved seeds before, I don't know if I can bring these back. Just do your best. It's something for the community, and it's something for people to encourage people to try gardening. And then save your own seeds. Now, when you save your seed, you have to be willing to let your plants go to seed, which means that you're going to wait until the end of the season. You'll start to notice that some of your vegetables, they're going to start ripening real fast. That's kind of a sign that your plant is kind of getting towards the end and wants to quit. The whole plant's life goal is to start seed. And so once you get enough fruits on there starting seed, it signals to the plant to stop production of fruit and to switch over to seed mode. So you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm done harvesting. Now I'm letting my plant go to seed. Wait until they're fully mature, and then you can save those seeds for the next year. And lastly, just have fun with it. You know, I have so many people tell me I do not have a green thumb, I cannot garden, and I just say that's a bunch of hooey. I do not believe that at all. I think everybody has plants that they are good at and plants that they're bad at. And I think it's just a lot of times takes trial and error. Every year, some plants thrive and some plants don't. I noticed this over my years at the gardens. One year, tomatoes would do awesome and peppers would do terrible. And the next year, it could be quite the opposite. One year, we had just the worst infestation of spider mites on our eggplants. One year, we had a flea beetle infestation on stuff. It just every year has its different challenges and its different successes. And that's not necessarily in your control. So don't let something like that set you back or think that you're no good at this, because that's just the way it goes. Diversify, try to do several different things so that if one crop doesn't do great, you know, the likelihood that something else that you have does will. And just have fun. Take notes, change things if you think you might need to try something else. And definitely join other people. We have a great community with the Botanical Gardens that volunteer, that just love to talk plants. Even if you can just come for a day or two, get with Alice. She could plug you in and you will learn more in a day of volunteering. Sometimes there are so many people out there that know way more than I do, that have just been doing this for years. So I just encourage y'all to try. I'm gonna stop my sharing, and so I hope y'all enjoyed that. And that wasn't just a second. Sorry about that. The UPS truck just went up the street. Okay. If y'all have any questions, I know I wrote it right to the time, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
So there are a couple of questions. Carolyn asks, will the Determinate tomatoes only give you one picking or yield?
Usually they will do, you know, there are some that have a tendency to do it more all together. I believe Celebrity that I mentioned earlier is one of those. However, I think my children are coming.
Can I trade with Pogo
Okay.
in the backyard?
Yes, you may. Sorry, my son's home. So, the Determinate varieties. Usually, if you keep picking, if you get them off quickly, you can have, you know, a couple of weeks of yield on those. It's not going to be like all one day necessarily, but they are going to be more of a narrow time frame. So if you want, one way that you can get around that is to plant a few different varieties, have a couple of different pots that ripen. If you'll notice, it'll tell you how many days to harvest when you pick your variety out on the little label. So if you have one that's a quick harvest, like, you know, you may have one that says 60 to 80 days, and you may have one that says 100 days. So if you get one that says 60 to 80 days and another variety that says 100 days, then you're going to extend your harvest just by that.
Okay. A landscaper advised his mother to put plastic bottles at the bottom of large outdoor containers in order to cut down on the amount of potting soil needed. How do you feel about that practice?
Well, okay, now if you have a giant pot, and you're welcome to those that are all saying bye that have to leave. Thank you so much for coming. But for those, it depends on how large your container is. If you have one of those giant containers, like at the Botanical Gardens, you know, you may consider it, but the plastic bottles aren't going to last long. They're going to squish down. I've never heard of that, really. I've heard of people putting clay, broken up clay at the bottom of their pots to help with drainage. That helps with drainage. It's going to last a little longer. But I would think that in general, you would want more soil, because the more soil you have, the more space you have for your roots to fill in. And also the more water retention you're going to have. So unless you have just a ginormous pot, I would probably want to use all that soil volume that you could.
I have a question in the chat, and I have a couple that I pulled off onto a Word document, but I want to get this one. Should you group your containers, meaning putting your tomato containers close to each other, or spread out to avoid losing all to a pest?
Yeah, well, I mean, theoretically, if you keep them separate, you know, if a plant, there are some insects that will walk from leaf to leaf, and then there are some insects that fly. So if you have a flying insect and you're just a few feet apart, you're probably still going to have that same thing transfer. But as far as foliar diseases splashing over, you would have less of that if you space them out. You know, so having a little space between them is definitely a good thing. But I understand too that aesthetically, it might be more pleasing to have a grouping of plants. But you may consider doing a grouping of maybe some different species or varieties of vegetables and flowers and herbs. And that way you're kind of breaking up that free ride or that highway, so to speak, for pest and disease. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Carol asks, nursery pots, as in the black plastic ones, I brought my shrubs in. I think you were talking about pots earlier. Yeah, you can reuse those as long as you sterilize them with the 10% bleach solution. Hold on. I'm in a meeting. The next question came from John. Is neem oil good for vegetables to control bugs and disease?
Yes, I use neem oil quite a bit in the garden. When I worked at the Botanical Gardens, the last couple of years that I was there, we pretty much switched it over to organic gardening, and neem was one of the things we used quite often. Neem has a special quality that it does inhibit some pests as well. Like, it can physically kill what it covers. If you think all oils, they're a contact pesticide, meaning they physically have to touch and coat that insect. to kill it. But the neem oil also has a little bit of a, what would you call it? They keep the pests from wanting to get on them. I'm losing my word there. Not deterrent. It's a deterrent, I guess you could say, for feeding. Sometimes plant pests will get on there and I'll be like, ooh, what is that? And so it's kind of a feeding deterrent as well. And I've also heard that neem does help with foliar diseases to some degree as well.
Okay. The next question comes from Carol. Any other tips on ants would be awesome. They killed a cucumber in my big raised bed last year.
Oh my goodness. So there's a product that's a bait called Come and Get It. It's an organic product. And it is designed for use in vegetable gardens. So I know it's available online. It's about $25 a bag. And it could be used for your yard too. But definitely it's been a while since I've read it. So you'd have to read the label as far as putting it in a pot, or you may try to bait around the pot. For ants, there's what they call the potato chip test. The potato chips, okay, ants are only going to go to a bait when they're foraging. And some of these baits, as soon as it rains or if they're in the sun too long, they can become inactive. So with the day that you think you're going to bait your ants, go out there and take a couple of potato chips and scatter in the yard. And if you come back in an hour and there are ants on it, you know, the ants are foraging and they'll take that bait. If there are no ants on it, they're not foraging that day. Usually if it's cooler, moist, or sometimes even if it's just too blazing hot, they might not be out foraging.
Cece has two questions. Any experience growing or starting lemongrass in a pot?
I have not grown lemongrass myself, but I know that the lemongrass has been grown just about every year. I was at the Botanical Gardens, the herb group there grew lemongrass. It was a pretty big staple of the Herb Society at the Botanical Gardens, and they would sell it at the plant sale. I'm not sure if they're still doing that. But they always looked very healthy. I would think that it would be a fairly easy plant to do.
And I think someone mentioned in the chat when she wrote that they bring theirs in during winter time because it's a tropical plant. Yeah,
tropical plants, aren't gonna obviously live over the winter. So the main thing, the certain plants are good to do that with, like say if you're growing some fruit type plants like lemon trees or Meyer lemons, some people do stuff like that and they'll bring them in. The main thing you want to think of is that you want to stop fertilizing over the winter months and you slow down on the water because you're kind of mimicking a dormancy period. So you don't want to keep pumping it full of fertilizer. You tend to get more foliar pests in the wintertime because the light level is so low. So if you slow down that plant growth, that can tend to help with that.
Non-animal sources for nitrogen additives.
Nitrogen, okay, not fish emulsion. Basically, compost. There's a mushroom compost that I've used, I use all the time. That's you can incorporate that into your soil and that will help feed your plants. You can also kind of add as a top dressing on the top. That's what they call it. Just at some point throughout the season, just kind of add a little layer to the top. You don't want to ever really add more than an inch of soil on top of your plants because that can actually kill those top roots. Those very top surface roots need oxygen. And so you never really want to cover all of those up. You never want to cover up the crown. Like there's a little place that you can see between the stem of your plant and that first root. You never really want to cover that up. So you can just add little amounts over the course of the season but you definitely want to get incorporated into your pot before you start growing.
Kay would like help with her cucumbers. She always gets a white substance and then the leaf dries up. She's in California.
Okay, so like the surface, are you saying the surface of the leaves get white? Or is it the actual fruit itself? I do know they tend to get powdery mildew, which is a foliar disease. It gets, it can also eat the blossoms. So you'll notice like it looks like a little mold or something on the tips of the blossom. We get that there too. It is often more prevalent in wet condition, cooler, wetter conditions. Yeah, the surface of the leaf gets white. It's probably powdery mildew. Some of those fungicide products may work on that. It is technically a fungus. A lot of times it helping with airflow, so it's not overcrowded is a big thing. But a lot of times just when it's humid and cool outside, it just happens sometimes. But yeah, look into a foliar like that, Garden Safe. I would just do an internet search, powdery mildew, foliar spray for vegetables. And you'll probably come up with more information than you want. So someone says, get more cucumbers. Yeah, there are varieties that are more pest and disease resistance. So when you're looking at varieties and selecting your plants, look for ones that are powdery mildew resistant if you tend to keep having that problem every year.
And Kay actually asked for help with chipmunks too. So I haven't heard chipmunks bothering containers, but I guess they could.
They might come and like to dig their little holes and plant their nuts in there, I bet. Oh gosh, that one is harder. I would say they would need a little bit of a physical barrier. Some people take plastic forks, or even if you can go to the thrift store or just go buy a box of forks at Walmart and stick them down in the soil with the forks sticking up, and nothing's going to want to dig in there like that. So it sounds a little funny, but if you're having trouble with anything digging, that can help put a stop to that. But as far as just in the overall yard, 5 years ago, we had holes everywhere in our yard from chipmunks. And then we started having a feral cat population in our neighborhood, and the chipmunks are now completely gone. So sometimes some cats might help.
And Cece just said that she adds pine cones to the top of her container soil to keep the kittens out of them, but it might change the acidity of the soil.
Yeah, if they all break down, if they're whole pine cones, as long as you're not incorporating them into the soil, and that's the same thing with mulches too, like pine bark mulch. Some of that, if you're incorporating it all the time, it can steal nitrogen from the soil, and it can also, like you said, raise the acidity a little bit. But if it's mostly on the surface and you're not just mixing it in, it should be okay. But that's a really neat idea. I like that.
Yep, whole pine cones, not so pleasant for the critters. And
yeah, looks a lot better than forks too.
Those are all the questions that I see today. I saw a lot of thank yous, and for you and the BBG for presenting this today. I want to thank our partners. I want to thank you, Amanda, for always being open to coming back and working with us. And just
thank y'all so much.
Your knowledge today.